Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining today. We are going to talk about QA automation and how did we get to that point while working together with Nestle in one project with them. So let's start. Simple repetitive tasks may cause unintentional errors. Well, our brain becomes lazy, right? When you are doing something repetitive, or we can be distracted also and get to some errors. This is something natural. This is human nature. So imagine when we have really complex scenarios. Of course, we're not talking about the same errors, but in the end, any simple issue can make the difference every time. Then imagine our daily routines. We got overload, we have stress, and we have IT, which is also a very difficult job nowadays. And then we have the perfect storm, right? And to be honest, I don't know any project with no issues at all. But fortunately, we have QA always, and we always need to consider them.
Hi, just a quick introduction for myself. My name is Bianca Möller. I'm a QA engineer, and I'm working in the QA department in Kokomo for more than a year now. The main part of my projects are Drupal related, and this year we started to focus a little bit more on test automation, and therefore we're excited to present you today our current results for our approaches that we had this. So now back to you, David.
Yeah, and I'm David Perez. I am a project manager working for Kokomo. I've been working in IT for more than 20 years in different positions. And now it is a pleasure for me being a PM with the team. So let me start also introducing a little bit this business introduction or showcase with Nestle. We are going to show you a little bit of the architecture we have with them in that project, the difficulties we challenge, and how we decided to implement this QA automation at the end. So if we do a quick analysis about what do websites in the food industry have in common, we mainly can see some conclusions, like, for example, we have a very much similar structure and content in all of them. Starting with brand sites, probably you all can see that in that kind of website, as well as recipes and products, then shop and product locators with also the typical buy now button in the products, and some other landing pages. For example, the news articles, we have the about us, or contact us, career promotion sites. And the question is, what can be a great solution to implement all these together, all these points? Then we have Drupal, and of course the CMS we are all interested in, right? What are the main advantages we see in Drupal to cover this? Well, we have flexibility because we can adapt as much as we want. We have innovation. There are many people working on it every day, providing the latest technological innovations to the project. We have security. I don't know how often, but we have very often a lot of new releases and security updates to the project. Also the facility, which is the trend nowadays, to make it super easy for non-technical people to manage the content. We have the multi-language also. Everything is built to work in many different languages as necessary for every single site. And we have also the integration, because you can easily integrate almost every other system with Drupal. with a huge amount of modules available for almost everything. And then another great advantage in terms of the effort is Drupal is offering a great solution in order to give the ability to always keep the site up to date without much development effort. When you have like everything set up, all the editors can start adding content, such, for example, a big amount of products, articles, recipes, without much development effort at the end. Right, and also we have the multi-site approach. This allows to give you a variety of different websites, updated all from one place, reducing as well the technical maintenance aspect. Then the question is, what about QA? If everything is great, like not much development effort at a specific point in the project. So the thing is, in quality assurance, while the setup might be easy to reduce in development side, in maintenance also in long term, the testing effort, like regression testing, smoking tests, sanity checks, may remain constant or may even increase proportionally with respect to the amount of content. As the amount of content increases, the manual regression also sometimes, like covering the 100% of the different sites might not be possible to a specific time. And therefore, QA will need to reduce the scope by being focused on the most important business parts. Meanwhile, providing a reasonable scope with the highest test coverage in case of manual testing is being maintained. So our project with Nestle. Now I'm going to introduce you a little bit the project, just to make it easy for you to understand the situation. Our project is basically a maintenance project for a set of already existing Drupal platform in the DACH market. We have 3 main portals there, all of them based in Drupal 8. We have Nest, which is the Nestle Nutrition Studio, Nest SB, the same one but made for professionals, and the NEMA portal, which is a marketplace for some Nestle brands. All of them are based in a reusable architecture. And we have also all of these built in a multi-site approach with a total of 11 different sites. With there some customization layers. We have, for example, the customization modules and the theme. Nest and NestFB are sharing both, and NEMA has also their own modules and the theme. This we can separate in the site customization and then in a common code base on top, which is the Drupal theme. We have also with Drupal, we have a Linus, which is the layer prepared for almost all the Nestle projects. And we have a lot of modules, business oriented to make it very easy with less implementation efforts. So the challenge, how did we get to the QA automation project at the end? Everything started with a Drupal core update, which took us a significant amount of time to test in doing manual testing, of course. Then at a specific time in the project, we have to achieve another second Drupal core update. And more or less, all the estimates we prepared for that second Drupal update were pretty much the same as of the original one, or even higher. So something that we couldn't manage, unfortunately, and then we have to think in another alternative. Then, and after several reiteration cycles and brainstorming sessions, we agreed that the best way to continue in order to reduce the QA efforts. And then, of course, to increase the test coverage is to start thinking on how to automate the processes. So we got our QA automation approved. And then Bianca is going to explain the execution of the project.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. So yeah, let us go on with the execution of the QA automation and our ideas and how we finally implemented them. So if we go to the next slide, you can see, you'll be able to see the simplified development workflow. So basically we broke up the workflow a little bit to the main task in order to visualize a little bit more easily where we integrated our automated test for now. So don't be worried that now we're just focusing on our own staging environment, because in this project we have two instances of QA. First of all, our ones, and then from the client side, they also have their own QA. So right now we're just going to focus with our tests and our automation approach on our own staging, basically mainly. So in this chart, you can see that usually we started with a task, which is confirmed by the client. So backend and front end are starting their development, the implementation of this task. And meanwhile, QA is doing their requirement analysis, probably preparing some test plans, test case creation, and everything which is related to our job, which we can already do before actually testing. In certain tasks, backend is going to create unit and integration tests, depending a little bit on the framework. And then after the code review from backend and front end side, we're ready to deploy to staging. So the unit and integration tests are going to be executed with the deployment, and we from QA at the point before we deploy it to our staging, we have the possibility to run our very own visual regression tool. So this is basically something customized, which was developed by one of our co-workers. And we decided in order to do so, because we wanted to have a little bit more flexibility compared to the ones which are already on the market. So for those who might be not that familiar with visual regression tools, this is basically doing everything which is also doing the commercial tools, like taking a screenshot before a change, taking a screenshot after a change, and then it's going to compare both screenshots and check if there has been some regression within deploying the change. So we're going to ideally run it before we deploy to our staging, and then after the deployment, we kind of run this tool again in order to check for unwanted changes. But we also have further automated tests which we can execute at this point. So we implemented Selenium tests, which are basically imitating user interaction with the website, with the applications. So we just had a very functional basic test right now where we are testing maybe user login or which can be extended, but right now it's just covering the basics. And then we also have the possibility to execute some Lighthouse tests in order to assure that the changes that we have committed are not affecting any of the KPIs in a negative way. And of course, we still maintain some manual testing part, depending also on the task. Not everything can be automated, so there will be always manual testing necessary, or also test monitoring for the automated tests, which is also some effort. So yeah, then the next step is deployment to production. I know this is kind of short, there are some more steps in between, but in order to concentrate a little bit more on the QA part, I think this is sufficient for now to leave it at this point. So if we go to the next slide, we can see what was our question. What are the advantages of the test automation? So this is a question that we had to ask ourselves, as well as communicate it to Nestle in order to see, like, okay, is this a good option for us to do right now? Or do we have to look into other options? So as you already saw, that we're moving in a multi-site environment, which might be an advantage for the development. But for QA, it's always a little bit difficult because you can say like, okay, we deployed one change to all sites, but yeah, although we might want to assume that this change is affecting maybe all sites in the same way, we cannot be sure. So for quality assurance, we always want to cover as much as possible with a reasonable effort. So what happens if we're having to check 11 sites? At some point, manual testing is not really feasible anymore. So as David already mentioned, we started to prioritize tasks. We said like, okay, this is business relevant, so we have to check this. And then break it down like from parts to parts in order to cover the most important parts, and then to see like, okay, the less important will have less QA, or we might even have to leave something out. So facing those challenges, we decided to push the incentive for automating tests for the repetitive tasks, as David already mentioned, the regression testing. And then we were aiming for the following goals. On the first side, of course, to reduce the amount of manual testing, which doesn't necessarily mean that we want to do less QA. We just want to, or our goal is to shift our manual efforts to the task and go into a deeper look into the task which really needs manual testing, which cannot be automated, and maybe increase the coverage in those tasks. Meanwhile, we can reduce the manual testing for the repetitive tasks. And also by this, by automating tests, we can increase the test coverage by saying, if you imagine the visual regression tool, which is taking screenshots, much more accurate than any human being could probably test the site, then you can also say this is going in a much faster pace than we could even do that. So instead of maybe picking priorities, we can actually, for the front-end test, increase much more size or even the whole site map, if possible, which is gonna target testing coverage, which might not even be possible to have, meanwhile, manual testing. With that, we also could increase the frequency of test runs. So depending on the degree of automation, like if you have 100% or 90% of automated tests, where you just need a very little bit of monitoring, it's very easy to run it as often as you want, especially if it's your own implementation. Then you can just run it more frequent, so you also have more security that everything is working fine without having a lot of additional effort. And yeah, if you think of that, also manual tests can be error prone. So if we have a lot of manual testing at some point, since we are all human beings, the brain will get tired, and there's a higher probability that some bugs on the site will be easily not seen by the tester if the tester's already testing various hours on the same site, and it's going to be difficult. So those were the advantages and also our goals we wanted to achieve with the test automation. So the next question we were asking ourselves were like, what are the instances for running our automated tests? So ideally, what we saw in the first slide was like before and after the deployment. This was our first idea where we said like, okay, we just want to make sure that a change in the implementation is not affecting anything front-end wise, so we can test it with a visual regression tool, or it should also not affect any features, so we can test that with the Selenium tool. Yeah, this comparison. But in the end, we also said like, okay, if it's not any extra work, for example, the Lighthouse tests or the Selenium tests, which are basically already running automatically and giving out automatic reports, where we do not have to, trigger them manually side by side. So it's just gonna run for all the site. Why don't we just let it run like once a week? And even if we don't have many changes during the week or even non-change, it doesn't harm to just run it and to have it there. And in case that something happened, we're gonna have the notification. And of course, to sum it up a little bit, at the end of each release cycle, it's nice to also, or at the end of each sprint, just to, just do a last check. Meanwhile, we are already collecting all the reports and reviewing everything and putting everything together. It's also a good point to run the automated test. The instances, I would say, are always depending a little bit on the sprint, on the scope of the sprint, and what we are working on the sprint. So we are more or less flexible in there, since we are always in contact with the whole team and with Nestle as well. So yeah, this can be also something more spontaneous apart from the automatic runs, which are being executed once a week. So let us take a deeper look in the tools itself that we implemented. So first of all, we have the visual regression automation tool. Here on the right side, you see a screenshot. So it's very simple actually. In order to have just a baseline, we are still working on some adjustments. It's working great right now, but we also want to have it a little bit more flexible, maybe depending on the size, and maybe also future for other projects to be a little bit more flexible in there. But basically, what the tester is going to do is like to create a new project. Just give it a name. In this case, it's NEMA testing, which is Nestle Marktplatz in our testing environment. You just have to specify the URL, and then you have the option to add the basic authorization if it's needed or not. So this is everything you have to do to set up a project, and then you're already ready to start. So for generating the baseline, you just have to push the button, and then the tool is going to crawl the sitemap if it's existent on the URL provided for the home page. So either it's going to look for the sitemap and get all the URLs which should be tested from there, or it's just going to crawl through the site and get the links and sublinks through a certain recursive depth. So depending on the approach, it's going to do all the screenshots of the list of the URLs specified through this crawler, and then for generating the regression build, it's just basically going to do the same. And then for each screenshot, of course, it's going to compare the original one with the regression one, and then compare it in order to see if there have been any deviations. So on the next slide, we're going to see the example of the output. So this is the more detailed output, where you can see on the left side, for example, all the URLs specified and also the status of the test. So either it's passed or it's failed. You can see it's passed in green, and then you can easily check that for the red and fail. You can click the URL or the specific item, and then on the right side is going to show you the screenshot, which is actually a third screenshot, which is comparing the first and second, overlaid with the differences marked in red. So here we have an example. On the right, you can see the screenshot that there have been 2 buttons removed. So it's going to be marked in red, those missing buttons. In this case, for example, it might have been a front-end change. So imagine that within the sprint, the task was to remove those 2 buttons. So of course, we have this result. In this case, that it was a wanted change that we can accept, we have the possibility to choose this scenario as the new baseline scenario in order to account also for changes that were implemented on purpose. And for our tool also have another overview, which we can see on the next slide. It's a little dashboard. It's just some basic statistics, but a nice thing to have just a quick overview of how many sites were tested, how many tests have passed in the absolute number, and also the number of failed tests. and also calculated in a percentage on the right side. So nothing very big, but just to have a quick overview and the status of the site, and then we can already check like, okay, has there been much regression, or is there maybe a bug which is repeating, and then we can look into the detail within the certain URLs where we can see the changes. Okay, so next let's talk about a little bit the Lighthouse test that we implemented. So for the Lighthouse test, we just decided that it's the easiest to run it periodically once a week to have a general monitoring, and then we still have the option to trigger it manually for all sites or even just for a subset of sites. To a certain point, for example, after deployment, when we are thinking that this might have been affected one of the KPIs that we're watching, so we can just trigger it manually, and it's going to run through all the tests and create for us the reports. Right now, we're looking into expanding it to more sites in order to have more coverage in there. And within this, we had to think a little bit about, okay, we automated the execution, but actually we also want to have the results in a proper way, because at some point it's not very sustainable to have one report for each site which you have to open. And this is also not in our interest to share that with us, like 20 reports, 30 reports. We just wanted to have some easy overview, which is nice for us and which is also nice to share with the project manager and also with the clients, so with all the stakeholders, to have a very overviewed look about everything. So we decided to write a little helper for us to have the results for the KPIs of interest automatically exported from our JSON files to one Excel files, where we can just see the new results next to the old ones, and then just have a first sight of which site was tested, what was the value before, what is the value now, in order to have an overview and to just detect any deviation on the first site without accessing each report. So for the Selenium test, which is there's the Selenium test framework, where we just wrote some basic tests right now. So the Selenium tests are used in automated testing frameworks in order to validate web applications. From a more technical perspective, we set up a Maven project for using Cucumber with the Selenium WebDriver. And for a more non-technical aspect, I would say it's like the setup pretends to be a user who's performing a defined sequence of steps. Like, for example, I open the web browser, then I insert this URL, I wait until the page is being opened, and then I click on the login button. So the Cucumber framework is making it very easy without a lot of programming skills to write those scenarios once you have the same framework set up. I mean, in the beginning, it's a little bit work to set up the framework, but then in the end, to write one scenario, which is covering, for example, the user login, it's not being very complicated. So I think a very interesting tool and very powerful. So for now, we covered for the sites which have it, the user login. We have a different scenario where the user is accessing his own profile, another scenario which should cover that the user is able to alter the own profile data and also update the changes. One scenario where we can assure that the newsletter sign up is available, so that a user can be checking the checkboxes for applying for the newsletter, and of course the user log out that this is gonna be process successful. And so for the Selenium test, it was the same question, similar to the Lighthouse test, because in the visual regression tool we have those nice reports and it's easy to check. But how can we share those test results also within our team and also with all the stakeholders in a nice overview. So we decided, because we're working with TestRail, on the next slide we'll have a little screenshot of how it kind of looks like if you have a little summary. So TestRail is a test management system where you can specify test cases, test runs, and do all the organization for QA, respecting one project where you have your test cases, and you can decide when you want to execute which test cases. So within our Selenium framework, we had the opportunity to also connect it to TestRail directly. So we collected the test cases which are supposed to be automated in one test run, and then we were able to specify the IDs directly to the test cases that we have. So you have to imagine, every time we're running those tests, afterwards, it's going to be updated automatically in our test management tool if this run has been executed with success or not, and which test has been passed and which has been failed. So yeah, in our term, like when we have this test run once a week, for example, then you can just check in afterwards directly and see like which test has passed or which not. And also we can still trigger the execution manually and check afterwards in TestRail. The advantage of this is that we can export, I mean, it has some option to export different PDF summaries. So you can select which kind of information you want to have in your summary. And this is really nice to share also outside the QA, which is in an understanding way, which is not pure code like, okay, here we have passed and here I failed. So, yeah, I think we still have some minutes left, no? So I would say, because there has been one more thought respecting this whole test automation, because I was asked various times like, okay, please give me a number about how much time we will save while implementing those automated tests. And I was always struggling to give a specific number, because it's very hard to say, because you're in the end comparing two different things, especially with the visual regression tool, for example, where you can say like, okay, maybe we're saving in the beginning 50% of time, but you also have to see that we are increasing the test coverage like the double or even more. So it's like two things you cannot really compare to each other, because in the end you're testing maybe X size, and then with the tool you'll be able to test 10 times more. So this is something which is then hard to tell. So in the beginning, let's say, okay, we increased the test coverage. Now we just need half of the time for our testing and for monitoring. So yeah, but then also this is a customized tool, so we are still working on that, and then maybe within the next 2 or 3 months we'll be even able to save more time. So especially for some solutions which are internally customized, this can be also changing. I mean, like usually for the better and not to the worse. So, but this is something a little bit harder to say. I think for the Selenium test, it's very obvious that if you act yourself as a test user and you go to the website and you click on the button, this is going to take some time. So let's say for one side, we just take maybe half an hour, because it's also not a lot of work. But then in the end, if you have a test and it's just going to execute it within 1 minute, and you don't even have to execute it on your own, and you have an automatic email notification if something fails. I mean, of course, from time to time, you're going to check into the cases and you're going to check it if everything is still okay. But this is very low effort. So I would say that you can even maybe in the long term save like 80% of the work. And for the Lighthouse test, it's the same. So imagine you would open each site and create a new report. And yeah, then you just once a week have to click one button and maybe have some 2-3 extra steps to export the results. But then it will maybe just take you 5 minutes to identify some of the weak points, or yeah, and also a way better overview to have all the numbers there in your Excel, and you can just not only check if there's a deviation, but also maybe if there's maybe for one side a little bit more variation than for others, and yeah, do a proper analysis about the numbers. So yeah, I think that was everything from my side. I would give the word back to David right now, and maybe already check the questions.
Right. Well, that's it. Let's check some of the questions we have from the audience. Maybe we can get some answers for them probably. For example, we have one here. Is the visual regression test performed on every page of the website or just samples at random? Bianca, you may get that question.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're doing that for the smaller website that we're taking the sitemap. So if it's not too big, then it makes sense also to cover the whole scenarios. And for bigger sites right now, we have the case that we are crawling through the sites to a recursion depth of 2. And then, yeah, we have a list of URLs that's going to be tested. Yeah, that's to my knowledge how we're doing that, since I'm also not the creator of this tool, but yes, of course, I mean, I was also digging a little bit into the functionality. So as far as I know, that's how we do it. So we're not only testing samples, we don't have to specify the URLs. This is something which is being done by the tool on its own.
Okay, let's take another one. I think I can get this from my side. Do you have in your team people writing only tests, or are developers also creating the QA part together with the functionality they build? Well, we work together, developers and testers, but it is true that most of the testing is covered by QA, although developers are also creating unit tests. This is something we also started in this project. And it is very, very useful to have kind of unit tests, because we are trying to run them as much as possible. And at the end, we are covering both, right? The functionality and the behavior, sorry. Okay, let's see another one.
Oh, I think I have one interesting here, because it says, how do you handle scenarios where the deployments may involve content changes or visual changes? In that case, pre-posted screenshots may not match. Is there any mechanism adopted to prevent false positive for this? So actually, yeah, this is, I think, a challenge always for all the sites in Drupal, because we have the content editors who can make changes anytime. And this is actually why we are running the tool on our own staging environment, not on the production environment itself, because in our staging environment, we don't have the content changes. The content changes are outside of our environment. So basically we have our environment just purely to check if any changes we make in from backend and front end side is affecting the site, and we're not that disturbed by any content changes. So that is actually we solved that with the environment that we're testing on, and we thought that this is a great advantage. Of course, content will need other QA, but we just wanted to separate it in our case. So this was our solution in order to prevent to have a lot of false positive. I think otherwise you would be needed to run the tool more often. and to make a more steady update of the baselines in order to account for the content changes.
Okay, we have another one related to false positive. Is it only comparing screenshots, the visual regression tool? Don't you have a lot of false positive with that, or need to update the base scenario all the time?
Yeah, I think this is similar. Yeah, it is comparing the screenshots, but I think it also has some mechanism to account for very small deviation. I would actually have to ask that the developer itself. He's not here today because he's on paternity leave, so something good. But this is, I think, a detail that we're still looking into it. In the beginning, we had more false positive that what we're struggling on, but then we tried rather to detect the cause of it. For example, like, okay, we had to make sure that the screenshots are taking always at the same position in order to not have any movements, vertical movements, which could cause any disturbance, which is actually not there. So there were like details that we had to adjust, but in the end, it seems that this adjustment already accounted for most of the false positives, so that we are left out with very few that are still manageable in a general monitoring effort.
Okay, then we have another one. Do you enforce an automated test coverage percentage gate? Well, I guess not really. We are not looking for a specific percentage, right? We are just running some specific tools for some specific actions, but not thinking on a percentage. Nothing stricted or fixed, I would say.
No, for now not, but yeah, I mean, I think that there would be also a way to put it in numbers to have it more visual, but yeah, for now it's just like as much as possible, but yeah, we don't have any specified numbers for now.
There's another question. Do you know of any fast testing framework that will interact with a website randomly that could be used as a website agnostic test framework? From my side, I don't know. Don't know, Bianca, if you have any idea or sample like this?
No, I wouldn't know right now.
I don't remember something similar.
In random ways, I'm not sure if I understand the question in the correct way, because right now, I mean, we have the Selenium test where we have like the test user interacting, but of course this is always the same way, basically the same data. I mean, like, also not always the same data. We also have the possibility to maybe modify the input. We did that for the user profile data, where we said, like, okay, in order to update the changes, we cannot always have the same input because those wouldn't be any changes. So we modified it a little bit, and there are actually ways to do that, to have the user basically have different kind of input by defining a string in a random way, and then having this as an input instead of always having the fixed string that we would insert in the input field. I'm not sure if this is answering a little bit the question, but yeah, we did it actually in our framework.
Okay, let's take another one. We have some seconds. What was the main reason you chose to build the visual regression tool yourself and not to use one of the market. Basically, I will say we have the knowledge, we have the chance, and it was easy for us to prepare it. So that's why we go for that direction. But yeah, also there are some others available in the market. So basically.
Okay, I think there's one more question left, but we ran out of time, so maybe we can just answer this in the written form right now. And yeah. Or is there anything more from your side? Otherwise, from my side, thank you very much for joining this session, and I hope you liked it. And I hope to see some of you people. I mean, I don't see anyone, but some of you people maybe in other sessions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody for attending.